In the summer of 1997, one relatively small currency move in one country triggered a chain reaction that crashed the economies of 7 different nations, wiped out life savings across an entire continent, and did it all in a matter of weeks. This wasn't a war. It wasn't a natural disaster. It was a currency collapse that spread faster than almost anyone predicted, exposing a hidden weakness shared by countries that, just months earlier, were being celebrated as the greatest economic success story in the world. This is the story of the 1997 Asian financial crisis. To understand how this collapse happened, you first need to understand just how impressive the region's growth had been leading up to it. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, countries like Thailand, Indonesia, South Korea, Malaysia, and the Philippines experienced such explosive economic growth that international observers began calling it the Asian economic miracle. Foreign investors, eager to get in on this growth, poured enormous amounts of money into these economies. But underneath this impressive growth, several of these countries shared a specific vulnerability. They had pegged their national currencies directly to the US dollar, keeping the exchange rate artificially fixed rather than letting it float freely based on market conditions. This made trade and investment feel more predictable and stable, but it also meant these currencies could become dangerously overvalued if underlying economic conditions changed. At the same time, many businesses and banks across the region had taken on enormous amounts of short-term debt, often borrowed in foreign currencies like US dollars, betting that their local currencies would remain stable indefinitely. The first crack appeared in Thailand. By mid-1997, foreign investors and currency speculators had grown increasingly skeptical that Thailand could actually maintain its currency peg, given a growing trade deficit and mounting private debt. Speculators began aggressively betting against the Thai baht, selling it in massive volumes in anticipation of a collapse. On July 2, 1997, the Thai government, unable to keep defending the currency peg with its limited foreign currency reserves, was forced to abandon it entirely, allowing the baht to float freely. The baht immediately lost a significant portion of its value. And almost overnight, Thai businesses and banks that had borrowed heavily in US dollars found their debt burden skyrocketing in real terms, since it now took far more baht to repay the same dollar-denominated loans. This single event, one currency peg breaking in one country, was about to trigger something far larger than anyone anticipated. Almost immediately, international investors began asking an unsettling question: if Thailand's currency peg could collapse this suddenly, which other countries in the region might share the exact same vulnerabilities? The answer, investors quickly decided, was most of them. Within weeks, currency speculators and panicked investors turned their attention to the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia, all of which shared similar fixed currency pegs and significant foreign debt exposure. One by one, these countries were forced to abandon their currency pegs as well, and their currencies collapsed in value, echoing exactly what had just happened in Thailand. Indonesia was hit particularly hard. The Indonesian rupiah lost an enormous portion of its value, and the resulting economic crisis triggered severe social and political unrest, contributing to nationwide protests and, eventually, the fall of President Suharto's 3-decade rule in 1998. South Korea, despite being a far larger and more developed economy, was also swept into the crisis. Major South Korean conglomerates, heavily leveraged with foreign debt, found themselves suddenly unable to meet their obligations as the Korean won collapsed in value alongside the region's other currencies. By late 1997, the crisis had spread across 7 countries, wiping out an enormous amount of regional wealth and triggering a wave of bankruptcies, layoffs, and social hardship across a region that, just months earlier, had been celebrated as an unstoppable economic success story. As the crisis deepened, several affected countries turned to the International Monetary Fund for emergency financial assistance. The IMF provided billions of dollars in emergency loans to countries like Thailand, Indonesia, and South Korea, but attached strict conditions, requiring these governments to raise interest rates, cut government spending, and restructure their banking sectors. These conditions were, and still are, deeply controversial. Critics argued they made the immediate economic pain significantly worse for ordinary citizens, even if they were intended to restore long-term financial stability, Gradually, throughout 1998 and into 1999, the affected economies began stabilizing and eventually recovering, though the human cost during the crisis itself, bankruptcies, unemployment, and social unrest, had already been severe. The crisis fundamentally reshaped how many of these countries managed their economies afterward. Several built up substantial foreign currency reserves specifically to avoid ever being this vulnerable to currency speculation again, a defensive strategy that continues to shape Asian economic policy today. Here's what makes the 1997 Asian financial crisis such an important story to understand. It shows just how quickly interconnected economies can transmit a single localized problem across an entire region, especially when multiple countries share the same underlying vulnerability. And it raises a question that's still relevant today. In a world where economies are more globally connected than ever, how much of a warning sign should a crisis in one country really be for its neighbors? So here's what I want to know. Do you think the IMF's strict conditions on their emergency loans actually helped these countries recover faster, or made the immediate crisis worse for ordinary people? Tell me your take in the comments. This is a debate economists still have today. If you find these regional, chain reaction style collapses just as compelling as the massive, single-country crises, subscribe, because untangling exactly how these dominoes fall is what this channel is all about. And if you want to see what happens when a country's banks grow so large relative to its economy that a single collapse threatens the entire nation, watch this video next on the Icelandic banking collapse of 2008. Thanks for watching. Which part of this surprised you the most? Let me know below, and if you want more forgotten history like this, subscribe, there's a lot more coming.